Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I'm doing fabulously well, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to sharing this fabulous story with you tonight. But before we get started, you know the rules. Go and get that perfect drink that you really enjoy, something refreshing and cool, or something warm and comforting, or something alcoholic and fizzy, who knows? But go and get it, because I've got a fabulous story. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, all I remember was how immaculate, pristine, untarnished it all was. It was so perfect. An exquisitely beautiful crisp morning at Whistler in Canada. I couldn't ask to be in a place more awe-inspiring, more dreamlike, more heavenly than this. The ski slopes were carpeted in a blanket of gleaming white snow. It cascaded over the mountains like gloriously thick frosting on a Christmas cake. It was the quintessential winter wonderland that reminded you of Christmas stockings hanging on the hearth, crackling fires, eggnog, hot mugs of chocolate, and pretty tinkles of Christmas bells. I'd been to Whistler many times before with my husband Gray. We were accomplished skiers, passionate about mastering the slopes every year. Little did I know how different this day would be. A day that would leave me wondering whether I really knew the truth about anything at all. A day that would leave me questioning my own life, what I thought I knew. In a few minutes, my life would never be the same again. You would think that I would wish to go back in time, to undo what was done, like the slip-ups in a piece of knitting, or the dropped stitches, but you would be wrong, very, very wrong. Sometimes the egg needs to be cracked, so you can see what is really inside it, whether it's good or rotten. If the egg isn't good, then leave, for that is the wisest course of action to take. You cannot change a bad egg back to a good one, except in very rare circumstances that are few and far between. It was so quiet, peaceful, deliciously tranquil out there on the slopes, with the twinkling sunlight dappling the snow in soft, dreamy, ethereal light that glittered, shimmered, twinkled, sparkled. Then there were the tall evergreen trees, their quintessential pyramid shapes reminding me of Christmas trees, their graceful needled boughs all draped in fluffy clouds of puffy snow that clung to their needles like white Christmas streamers. Better still, the world was ours to conquer on this early morning. There wasn't a solitary soul in sight. We wasted no time in skiing up and down the undulating slopes. As far as we could discern, the snow had been perfectly managed by the snowcat controller over the previous night. All the skiing trails of the previous day had been cleared, and any potential avalanche hazards. We were to learn later that this was in fact not the case, as warnings had been placed up in the foyer of the hotel, none of which we had noticed or discerned. We didn't have a care in the world this morning, gliding so seamlessly with our skis, as though floating on air. Then it happened. My world came crashing down upon me. Suddenly there was a shush. Then the snow began to break apart, as if the very hollows of the earth were opening up to swallow me, rather like a fly being washed down a drain pipe. I was that tiny, inconspicuous, fragile fly, at the mercy of the elements, clinging on to a dying hope that faded every passing second like the dying bulb in a chandelier. I knew I was in an avalanche. This moving snow thundered, boomed, crashed, moving down the slopes faster than my thoughts, for this wind-borne, hectic floor of snow blasted towards me, showers of snow flying, flitting, swooping up in the air in surging, forceful showers. The snow thrusted me forwards into its charge like the high breakers of a tumultuous sea, throwing, tossing, whirling me around. I was like a baby seal being flung into the air by an orca whale. I was helpless, impotent, feeble. My choice to live had been expunged from me. It was not my decision to make. It was now in the hands of a higher power. for this aggressive sea of ice hurtling towards me held my very life in its hands. I had lost my control, strength, influence of any kind over anything at all. It had been robbed, hijacked, demanded from me. Now it was the earth that was to decide my ominous fate, for my valiant efforts to overcome the tsunami of snow were futile, unavailing, and completely inefficacious. It seemed what had taken all but 60 seconds had lasted an entire lifetime for me, until everything settled, became very still, calm. I tried to scream. I couldn't. My throat was filled up with snow, which I knew was exceedingly dangerous, for you can die from carbon dioxide poisoning like this. Luckily, I managed to use my elbow to remove the snow from my mouth and nose. I was entombed in a very dark, murky coffin of ice. It was so dark, oppressive, claustrophobic. The weight of the snow on my chest was squeezing the very breath out of my lungs, like a boa constrictor tightening its body around my chest, tighter and tighter and tighter, sucking it out of me so hard, so forcefully that I could barely breathe. I could feel incredible pain as it coursed and pulsed through my body in spasms of electricity. Then waves of nausea floated through me in little twitches, along with the raw, throbbing, deadening pain of the snow itself that was quite literally freezing me to death. I could feel that icy numbness engulf my entire body. I didn't think about anything at all but the inbuilt desire to live, to see my children again back at home in Boston. The flashes of their laughing faces, birthdays come and gone, tormented and teased my mind. Would I ever see them again, I wondered. The horror that I might be living on borrowed time haunted me. I knew I couldn't afford to become burdened by the weight of my fear, as it would suffocate me far quicker than the snow itself. I tried to work through the snow with my hand to find an air hole, to give me that life-saving air to survive just long enough for someone to find me, to find us. Then something pounced on top of me. It felt substantial, strong, powerful. I thought it had to be my husband. I really did. He had come to my rescue. He had found me. Perhaps he hadn't been caught up in the avalanche after all. I seemed to vaguely remember him being further away when it happened. The relief that knowing I was being rescued gave me a fighting chance that I might just survive this. My husband was digging away frantically at the snow, so fast that the load on my chest significantly lightened. It was no longer so painful to breathe any more. Finally, I was being released from my concrete coffin of ice. But wait for this. It was not my husband that had rescued me. It was Bigfoot. That in itself was hard to grasp, comprehend even, but it didn't matter a brass farthing. What mattered was I was alive. I could hardly believe it. What I did next so spontaneously even surprised me, catching me completely off guard. I ran into this Bigfoot's arms, embracing him with feelings of rapturous joy. I began to sob and sob on his hairy shoulders, wetting his long fine hair with an avalanche of my own tears. I tried to hug him, but his girth was so big I couldn't get my small arms around his sizable torso. But I could feel how ripped, how muscular he was, how strong, powerful, lanky. I'd never been so grateful to be alive before. Until you've been this close to death, only then can you fully encompass what being brought back from the precipice of death really means. I did not know why I wasn't afraid of this creature, but being rescued makes the rescuer a hero, regardless of whether he's covered in hair or not. My nose was submerged in his long hair. I could smell the soft, reassuring scent of a pine forest on him. It was immersed in his hair like a shampoo, intermingled with the slight smell of human sweat. The Bigfoot patted my back reassuringly, pointing to my body, as if he was asking me whether I was all right, whether I was hurting or not. I was astonished, because I felt as if I'd been punched, assaulted, kicked in the guts. My body incessantly ached, throbbed, pulsated, with shooting pains absolutely everywhere. I couldn't distinguish what hurt more, my leg, my foot, my shoulder, my back. It was like I'd been through a meat grinder and made into burger patties. It was at this point that I wondered where my husband actually was, but that was when I saw a fresh trail of snow tracks that belonged to him on the new snow that had been thrust forward by this avalanche. So he had been around here. So he was fine, but then where was he? I could see his footprints led back from whence we had initially come. Surely he hadn't gone back to our hotel, I thought, leaving me stranded out here in this white wilderness. But then again, maybe he'd gone for help. Of course, that was it. He'd gone for help, surely. I assured myself of this, but help seemed a long way in coming. I tried to walk, but everything hurt so incredibly badly, so much so that the Bigfoot just whisked me up in his arms, as if I was as weightless and as tiny as a Barbie doll. He glided with me very gracefully towards an area where he could see in the distance the early morning skiers moving around. They were like obscure dots, or chocolate Smarties if you like, in red, pink, yellows and blues. When they were close enough for me to call out for help, but not too close for the Bigfoot to be seen by them, he then put me down on the ground. I understood he did not want to be seen by other people. I could not blame him. I would not want to either if I was wearing his shoes or trailing around in his big padded feet that were the perfect snowshoes, as he didn't appear troubled by the icy snow underneath him. Once I was on the ground, the Bigfoot held my gaze for a moment. His deep-set treacle-coloured eyes looked troubled, rather concerned, very protective towards me, as if it was a struggle for him to leave me stranded there, but he knew he must. He couldn't risk being seen. I watched him leave. I so did not want him to go. I really didn't. He made me feel safe, secure, protected. My heart swelled with infinite love for such a creature, because he had shown me such selfless compassion. He was beautiful, lofty, graceful, majestic, powerful, incredibly kind. I think he was about 8 foot tall, covered in long, flowing, thick hair that was as black as a raven's feathers. His body was ribbed with dense muscle, his torso burly, thick, sinewy. His overlong arms trailed to beyond his knees, but it is the pyramid-shaped head that I can never ever forget, for it beheld a strikingly human face with high cheekbones, a sloped, furrowed forehead, a flat nose, a thin mouth, and the most beautiful dark eyes. Once the Bigfoot was gone, I felt so alone. It was a while before I actually called out for help. Some skiers heard my frantic cries, thankfully coming to my rescue. I was then escorted to hospital, and once I had a clean bill of health by the medical team there, and being assured that nothing had been broken, although my body was badly battered, very bruised, I left the hospital with painkillers to relieve that pain. I ventured to the hotel room to look for my husband. I noticed he had recently been back in our bedroom suite, as the shower was still warm and steamy, while there was a damp white towel on the radiator and a large white bathrobe strewn across the bed. I wondered if he'd even bothered to call for help. I made inquiries at reception and found out no one had been reported caught up in this avalanche, but the slope I'd been on had not been attended to by the snowcat last night or in the morning, and the warning signs in the lobby had been overlooked. Why had my husband abandoned me like this? Surely he'd seen me being massacred by this onslaught of snow. Why had he not tried to save me? Why had he not called for help? I got into the lift, hobbling awkwardly on a slightly sore foot towards the hotel lobby, making my way to my husband's favourite restaurant, where I assumed he would be. My husband was there, sitting with our 2 best friends, Paul and his wife Claudia. They were having lunch together, laughing, clinking glasses of sparkling wine. I felt like an outsider looking in on a private party. 3 pairs of eyes looked up in surprise to see me as I approached the table. But no one looked more bewildered or astonished than my husband. His face had grown ashen white, his jaw dropped open. I knew in that instant that he had deliberately left me out there to die. But why? What would be his motive to do such a deplorable, nonsensical thing? Then I knew the answer to that question as the light went on in my head like an all-consuming lighthouse that enabled me to see what was hidden in plain sight. It was a whole year ago that my husband had taken out a hefty life insurance policy on me. He had claimed it was to benefit the girls in case something terrible were to happen to me. At the time, I hadn't been adverse to this idea. The policy was worth money, lots of it. Was his primary motive for abandoning me at the Avalanche site a quintessential opportunity to play ignorant when my deceased body was finally found under piles of snow, while he would reap the benefits of a sizable insurance policy? I had always known my husband was motivated by money. But this was disgusting, repugnant, unacceptable. "Oh, there you are," said Claudia, looking pleased to see me. "Gray told us you weren't going to be joining us for lunch this afternoon. How did your shopping spree go in Whistler? Girl, I wish you'd called me. We could have made a day of it together. A girl's day out. You know I love shopping. Did you buy anything really nice?" I glanced at my husband. His expression was blank, but I could see his hazel eyes had become frightened, panicky, perturbed. I'm sure he was thinking quickly on his feet to explain away his abysmal behaviour out there on the ski slopes. "If you must know, Gray and I were up early this morning on the ski slopes together. I was hit by an avalanche, buried beneath layers of thick snow, while my husband just abandoned me, left me there to die." Claudia's face went white. Her blue eyes filled with disgust. "Is this true, Gray? Did you leave your wife under an avalanche of snow? You didn't, did you? You wouldn't, would you? No, there must be some mistake. It's not possible. You wouldn't do this to your own wife, surely. There has to be a mistake." Claudia looked absolutely mortified. She was blubbering away, trying to make sense of what I'd just told her. She didn't want to believe that it could possibly be true. "Sweetheart," said my husband, looking at me as if I was losing my mind. "Remember, dear, you went out on the ski slopes all on your own this morning. We agreed to this. I never accompanied you. You were on your own. When I woke up, I assumed you'd gone skiing, then shopping in Whistler like you said you would." "That's not true. Why are you lying, Gray? You know we never ski on our own. We always do it as a team. You were with me. I wouldn't go out on my own. I never would. I remember clearly. I saw your tracks in the snow after the avalanche had hit. They were returning back to the hotel. You knew I was lying there somewhere under the ground, but you did not rescue me. You knew I was trapped, but you walked away. How could you do this to me? I'm your wife, for goodness sake." At that, there was a deadly silence at the table. No one said a word, as everyone was processing what I just said. Claudia's eyes looked at her husband as if to say, "My God, this is unbelievable. I can hardly believe what I'm hearing." Paul looked at my husband directly. He noticed my husband flush bright crimson. "You were there, weren't you? You watched your wife being covered in snow. You did not even bloody help her. How could you, dude? You're a monster. No one normal behaves like this. This is your wife you're talking about. She could have died out there." All right, calm down," said my husband. "I admit it. I was there. I hold my hands up to it. I panicked. I couldn't find my wife anywhere. I looked for her. I kind of lost it, I guess." "You mean you left your wife to suffocate out there in the snow after an avalanche? Time is of the essence. People die. They die quickly." "How could you?" said Claudia. "What the heck is wrong with you? Your wife could have died. What about your girls back home in Boston, having to grow up without a mother?" "I think we should call the police. Not calling for help is tantamount to murder. It's the same thing. You can't get away with this, Gray," she growled. "I won't let you get away with it. We won't let you get away with it. This is appalling. What the heck were you thinking?" "Calm down, Claudia," I said. "No one is calling the police. That's the last thing I want to happen. Despite everything, Gray is still the father of my children." "Are you hurt?" asked Claudia, looking at me in alarm. "You haven't broken anything. Did you see the doctor for a once-over?" "I'm fine," I reassured everyone, taking a seat at the table next to Claudia. "I am rather battered and bruised, but I will live. It is a miracle I didn't break anything, because the force of that snow was so powerful. It's like being hit by cement. But how? How did you get out of the snow? I don't understand. I was very lucky. Someone kindly dug me out. I tell you what, I said. You know what I'd love? A hot cup of warm chocolate. I could do with something wickedly sweet, very, very hot. Claudia started waving her hand in the air for a waitress. Could you bring her a hot chocolate? And a large slice of carrot cake right now, she said, pointing at me. She needs lots of sugar. She's had a little bit of a shock. Sweetheart, said my husband, I'm so sorry for walking away like I did. I guess I just lost it. I wasn't thinking straight. It was all such a terrible shock for me. Oh, don't, Gray. Don't you dare. You're digging a hole bigger for yourself every minute. I would quit while I was ahead if I were you. If you were my husband, I would have locked you up, thrown away the key, and kicked you to the curb. He took out a life insurance policy on me, I said. Maybe he was hoping to cash in on my misfortune. I think I'm going to be sick, said Claudia, looking at my husband in disgust. I could see him flushing again. I knew in that moment my hunch was right. He had not deliberately set out to kill me, but when I became buried under an avalanche, he saw the quintessential opportunity of striking it rich quickly. It was a very discomposing thought, but it's not the first time that money has led people to do duplicitous things, and it won't be the last either. It can bring out the very worst in some people. I want a divorce, I told my husband. I'll be getting the next flight back to Boston the day after tomorrow. You want a divorce, said Gray, but I don't understand. Can we not talk about this? You don't understand, said Claudia. Is this some kind of a joke? You've got off lightly, mate. If you were my husband, I would drag you, kicking, screaming, to the next police station. Of course the girl wants a divorce. No one wants to remain married to someone who left them to die in the snow. Are you kidding? Is that it? Said my husband. We're not even going to speak about this. You just want a divorce, just like that? That's right. I want a divorce. There's no point in discussing anything any further. You've shown me the contempt you actually feel about our marriage. I thought we were happy. I thought we were in love, settled, secure, safe. But your actions have spoken differently. They've spoken 1,000 words. You don't love me. I don't want to be married to someone who doesn't love me. You love money more than you'll ever love me. That is clear. My husband's eyes clouded with crocodile tears. But I do love you, he insisted, more than anything. What about the kids? They need a loving home, 2 parents to raise them. Think, sweetheart, think what you're doing to us. Please, Gray, said Claudia, making a gagging sign with her fingers. Please don't insult our intelligence. You don't even know the meaning of the word. Love is about sacrifice, putting others before yourself. All things you clearly failed to do. Things that a husband is expected to feel about his wife and kids. But not you, Gray. You had other ideas in mind that revolve around $signs. That evening Claudia insisted I shared her suite with her, while her husband found a single room somewhere else. I could see that she was a genuine, true friend. I was grateful for her company, as she was that sounding board where I could vent my raw emotions, which were as numb as if they had been trapped under that freezing cold snow with me. I think it was my mind's way of processing everything that had happened, drop by drop, rather like a leaking tap, so that slowly and surely I could finally come to terms with the fact that in the morning I was still very much a married woman, and by lunchtime I was filing for divorce. I cannot believe what you've been through, said Claudia, giving me a warm hug. I've never liked Gray. I always thought he was a little shifty, but I was friends with him on your behalf because he was your husband. It seemed my gut instinct about him was right all along. He's a real loser. I loved him, I said, with all of my heart. I have children with him, beautiful children, I said, feeling a tear rolling down my cheek. What kind of self-respect would I have for myself if I stayed with a man like that? So who did rescue you from that avalanche, Claudia asked me again. You never told me. Bigfoot rescued me. For a moment Claudia became as still as an ice statue. Her mouth dropped to the ground. Her eyes widened. You are joking. This is some kind of a wind-up, surely. No, this can't be true. Do I look like I'm joking? I asked her. Bigfoot! Bigfoot rescued you. That's right, Bigfoot. You must have been terrified, said Claudia. No, actually I was relieved. I gave him a huge hug. I cried on his shoulders. Of course, I couldn't really hug him. I mean, I couldn't get my arms around his torso. He was so wide. But I did try. Claudia looked as if the cat had got her tongue. You hugged a Bigfoot. You cried on its shoulders. What? What did it do? It patted my back, as if to reassure me. He was ever so nice. What did he look like? Asked Claudia excitedly. Was he how you would expect a Bigfoot to look like they talk about on television programmes, or was he different? In truth, I think I was inclined to think of him more as a creature of legend than something that was real, that bore a striking resemblance to King Kong, I suppose. I never expected to encounter one for myself, so I never meditated on what encountering one would actually be like. And did he? Did he bear a striking resemblance to King Kong? No, not really. But he was huge. Let's not kid. He was massive, colossal actually. Imagine a bear with the body shape of a human, only so much bigger and more graceful. Well, that's what you'd call a Bigfoot. You mean like a giant with hair, but with a human face? Asked Claudia. Something like that, I said. It's hard to explain, really. I don't understand why you weren't terrified. The creature was digging you out of the snow, for goodness sake. How did you know that he was not planning to eat you? Because he was so human. If he ate me, it would be like he was a cannibal, but it wasn't that. You know, when something is helping you, you know. He was getting me out of that snow. He was saving me. He was frantic, worried, desperate to help me. So how are you going to thank Bigfoot for rescuing you? Don't you think you should buy him a gift? Said Claudia. I mean, it's the very least you could do, because the creature saved your life, for goodness sake. I'd like to very much, I said, but I don't know where he lives. At that, we both giggled. Well, why don't you put your gift close to the Avalanche site, hidden behind some cedar trees there? Something like that. You can only try. We could go shopping in Whistler tomorrow, make a day of it, buy the creature some things that Bigfoots might like. I'm sure he'll guess that they're from you. I mean, who else would leave a box of treats in the snow for him? He'll put 2 and 2 together and make 4 and get it right. He's clever, I'm sure of it. So that's exactly what we did. We bought a large wicker basket in town. We filled it with potato chips, peanut butter, granola bars, cookies, grapes, apples, prunes, dried mangoes, dried figs, tinned salmon, peanuts, walnuts, raw honey, cashew nuts, hazelnuts, tinned Christmas cake, apple pie, pecan nut pie, pork pie. It was Claudia that went and placed my basket near the place where I'd had my accident. The following day, everything had gone, but in the basket was a pretty stone, which I like to believe is from the Bigfoot. I still have that stone today, which I treasure very much. It's a river stone, really, nothing of value, but exceptionally pretty for a river stone, and it's very precious to me. To cut a long story short, when I returned home to Boston, I filed for divorce, and never really got to see Gray again, apart from when he picked the children up for days out and the odd holiday. My kids never understood why we got divorced, for I never told anyone a thing, nor did Gray. He never said a word either. There was no point in airing our dirty laundry, but it was clear to everybody that something had happened on that holiday that had torn our marriage apart, limb from limb. Until now, Claudia is the only person I have ever told about my Bigfoot encounter, although she did tell her husband, who was so excited that he went hiking in the area, where he discovered hundreds of huge footprints in the snow that he believed belonged to my Bigfoot friend. Do I have any regrets about starting my life all over again? Absolutely not. I'm happier now than I've ever been. 5 years after I filed for divorce, I married a man who would climb Mount Everest for me if he needed to, and my children as well. He would take a bullet for me in a heartbeat. I won't settle for less, as love is what makes our lives worth living, and we should be willing to die for those we love. Otherwise, what's the point? So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, goodbye and good night.